Semicolons. A lot of good uses, interesting uses for semicolons. We saw before in the comma section that you can use commas to separate items in a list. Now semicolons can do the same thing, but you tend to do it when the items in the list are a little bit more complex than just a simple phrase or word. So take this sentence. The criminals stood in a row, colon. One had a long, dark beard and freckles. Another looked nervous. One whose eyes shimmered wore a red scarf. Another was dressed in a suit with a silk tie, beautifully shiny. Two more stood with their hands in their pockets and were leaning against each other, and the last had on a straw hat that was tilted slightly to one side. Now, first thing I want you to notice is that this is a highly complex sentence. This has a lot of items with subclauses within them as well. So in such cases is when you want to think about using semicolons to separate the different ideas that are in there, so you know what kind of list you're dealing with, because without it you're going to just get a very messy thing where people are going to, their minds will be struggling to try and figure out which things to focus on. The commas don't do enough in that sentence to delineate the items in the list, so you need some other device. So that's why I say the functional usage of a colon here is ideal. So rather than having a sea of commas, you would get this. If you reordered that list using semicolons as well as commas, you'd get a lot more clarity. For example, the criminals stood in a row, colon. One had a long, comma, dark beard and freckles, semicolon. Another looked nervous, semicolon. One whose eyes shimmered wore a red scarf, semicolon. Another was dressed in a suit with a silk tie, comma, beautifully shiny, semicolon. Two more stood with their hands in their pockets, comma, and were leaning against each other, semicolon. And the last had on a straw hat that was tilted slightly to one side. Now, you can see that ordered that way, you're able to know that the list is going through the different individuals, and with certain characteristics associated with those individuals included. But the commas separate the characteristics, the semicolons separate the individuals. So that is a really interesting example of how to use semicolons effectively in a sentence where the items on a list are complex rather than simple. Now, the use of semicolons in that case isn't your only option, and it may not even be your best option. So you want to consider other possibilities too. You could break up all of those into just sentences with full stops, because that might actually make it easier to grasp everything and hold these ideas in your head without getting lost. Although the semicolons work quite well, but I just want to show you alternatives. Your objective here is to tidy things up as much as possible. So you saw with the commas that it was very untidy. With the semicolons it was tidier. How about this? With using full stops, it might be even tidier. The criminals stood in a row, full stop. One had a long, comma, dark beard and freckles, full stop. Another looked nervous, full stop. One, comma, whose eyes shimmered, comma, wore a red scarf. Another was dressed in a suit with a silk tie, comma, beautifully shiny, full stop. Two more stood with their hands in their pockets, comma, and were leaning against each other, full stop. And the last had on a straw hat that was tilted slightly to one side. I actually prefer that sometimes, because you don't have to kind of wonder, you don't get this long list. I'm not a fan of long lists anyway, so I'm just showing you the different flexibility you have in expressing these ideas. But you hopefully can see that using commas in a kind of list format is the least attractive of those options. Why? Because it's untidy. The hard breaks, so you're using semicolons to indicate a kind of soft break, or you could use the full stops to have hard breaks. You decide which works best for you. Full stops actually give our mind, I think, a little bit more of a rest, and it just gives you less to kind of be in suspended animation. That's an important concept in writing as well. Try not to hold the reader in suspended animation for too long, because their mind gets tired. The rhythm is different using the full stops compared with the semicolons. So you want to look at the use of semicolons within the context of the overall piece. You know, if it adds a bit of variety to the structure of the piece, you might think that it sort of increases the elegance of it. So I want you to bear all those things in mind when considering the use of semicolons.